This is a recording of a live Zoom session of the Altadena branch of the Seed Library of Los Angeles, recorded Saturday, November 6th, 2021. Hope you enjoy it.
All right. So before we get started, I have a couple announcements or a few announcements. Those of you who are Seed Library members, I want to let you know that we have finally digitized our seed check-in form. So if you have seeds to check in, you can either email me and get a PDF and print and fill them out by hand, or you can fill them out online. And I will put that link in the chat as soon as I'm done talking. So that's brand new. We sent it out with our last email, but we're going to keep highlighting it. I also wanted to let everybody know that the Seed Library, we're going to be at the Farmers Market in partnership with the Altadena Library this week, or next week, I should say, Wednesday the 10th. There for the whole time from the open till close. So please stop by and say hi or send your friends. We'll have information about the library and gardening. I think there's a plant swap, but I can't remember if that's what the library is doing this time, like bring a seedling, take a seedling. And then the third announcement, and this one's super important, and this is for members and non-members, because our presentations are open to the public. You don't have to be a Seed Library member to come and participate in the presentations. That we annually do a survey where we survey our membership and our attendees to our workshops to gauge what people are interested in. What do you want to see presentations on for the following year? So we collect all that information, and then in partnership with the Altadena Library, we try to find presenters for those topics. So I'm going to put the link to that in the chat as well. And please, I encourage you to fill it out. Because the more people who participate, the better gauge we have of what our community would like to learn about. And then finally, before I hand it over to Gina to talk a little bit about the Seed Library, we're always looking for new volunteers. So if you feel like you have a couple extra hours a month to spare and like to join a great sort of casual volunteer group, please contact us. I'm going to put our email in the chat as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put all these. I have going into the chat the interest survey first. I'll put it in right now. Except that I can't get to there. Okay, there's the interest survey. And then I am going to put in all of our contact information and including the seed check-in form. And then Gina, go ahead and take it away.
Righty. Okay, so we are SLOLA, and we're a not-for-profit local organization based here in LA, and we do have one branch in Venice. Before COVID, we met at the Altadena Library, and now we're on Zoom. So the idea of SLOLA is that we're going to be hyper-local to the Altadena area. The goals of this organization, we are looking to grow acclimated seeds to our specific bioregion and climate, so as to cultivate crops and plants that are more resilient, hardy, and fruitful because they're naturalized to our weather here in East LA. And that process takes 7 seasons. We're also interested in building a community of gardeners and people interested in food security, habitat restoration, and wildlife, as well as a network of knowledge and wisdom so that we can cultivate communal resilience for us humans, the legacy of the seeds we're growing, and the wildlife that we cohabitate with. How SLOLA works. Our meetings are always open for all to attend, as Jessica said. We have speakers each month, except for a month like this one, where it's more of a round table. And our speakers will share on various topics that we find relevant to the mission. To be a member, all you need to do is live in LA, pay a one-time $10 donation, and that gains you access to check out 4 varieties of seeds every month, and those are seasonal. The intention is, why we use the term check out, is because we would love for you to bring your seeds back after your growing season. This is harder with some varieties than others, which we know. We have some extra education information about commonly hybridized plants and things to look out for when you're saving your seeds. But the general criteria is that need to be open pollinated, organic, and non-GMO. So if you need more information, please just contact us. And that's it.
All right. I have you spotlighted. I'm gonna remove or pinned. All right. All right. Thank you, Gina. So I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our panelists today. They're going to be taking your questions, and please, so how we're going to run it is that Sue, our volunteer Sue, is going to moderate, and she'll be taking all your questions in the chat. And so please put any questions you have for our master gardeners in the chat. Sue will collect them, and sometimes she may not go in order. If she may take them in order, or sometimes she groups them together into similar questions. And we also know that as questions are being answered, more may emerge for you. So just keep putting them into the chat for our Master Gardener panelists. And so let me just give me 1 second. I think that if I spotlight people, then you guys will all be the ones shown. I just need to ask someone one question. Okay, so first we have, let's see, who do I have? Okay, we have Judy Gomez. She's a master gardener. I am going to spotlight you, Judy. Great. There, say hi, Judy.
Morning, everybody.
Judy is a master gardener. She lives in the Pasadena, Monrovia kind of foothill area. And she has taught a couple of the Grow LA Victory Garden classes in her area. So for last spring and this fall, correct? You just finished up one. Yep, so that's Judy. We also have Yvonne Savio. Many of you probably know her by name, if not by face as well. Longtime master gardener, used to run the program. So welcome, Yvonne. Thank you for joining us. And we have Christine. Hold on, let me spotlight you, Christine. There we go. She's a master gardener as well. And I've recently met her. She's getting super involved in the program, and we welcome you also to the panel. We also have a master gardener who's going to be participating in the chat. Her name is Joy. Where are you? Can I introduce you, Joy? I don't see you though.
Yes, hold on. I don't have my video on.
Where'd you go? Nope.
I'm here.
Where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay, let me just let you real quick, just so people can say hi. So Joy will be participating in the chat, just following up with any questions, adding her experience. She lives in the Castaic area, so she's in a slightly different climate than our panelists, who are all sort of in this San Gabriel Valley-ish area. So she may have a slightly different take on some things just because the climate is different. Okay, I think with that, we will take it away. So Sue?
Yes, okay, it's on me. Sorry about that, people. We have some questions that came in by email prior to the start of this event. And the first ones are from Louisa. She has a Romanesco broccoli that produced giant leaves, but no broccoli heads. What would cause that? Anybody got any ideas? Yvonne, Judy, Christine?
I'm not catching what the name of the plant is.
It's a broccoli. It's a Romanesco broccoli.
Oh, okay. And what was the problem?
That it produced giant leaves, but there is no broccoli head. It's not, I guess it's not producing florets. I don't know if it's not producing florets or if it's just not developing big heads.
It may just not be its time yet. The Romanesco makes one large, it's a cross between the cauliflower and the broccoli. It's that beautiful one that has the geometric pattern.
Yeah.
And if it's just leaves, maybe it just hasn't matured sufficiently in order to put out the broccoli cauliflower.
So, yes, Judy.
I've had a problem similar with a lot of my brassicas. And when I look really closely, the inside, so here's all the leaves, the inside has actually been eaten away by something, some critter, some bug, something. So there really isn't a chance for that to develop, but the leaves are fantastic. And Joy, I know, has a wonderful recipe for broccoli chips you can use your leaves for. But that's happened to me because I have so many critters.
I know I never get heads on my broccoli, but I eat the florets and I eat the leaves and I love them both.
I have a question about that. Someone once suggested that if it gets too warm, some of the brassicas won't produce a head, but I don't know if that's a true
No,
statement.
because it would just automatically bolt, which is, forming the whole thing. But also, like with all plants, if the foliage is super green and super large, chances are that's been fed too well with the nitrogen. So, but certainly Judy's point about it being eaten out, that might be worth, parting everything so you can actually look at what's going on there.
Yeah, I look at it every day. And the thing's just getting bigger and bigger. It's like Jack and the Beanstalk. It's like, it looks okay. And I wash it off, hose it off, make sure there's no bugs on it. And it's just getting gigantic. And it's doing something, but I don't know what. Guess I'll be a surprise.
No, it's doing good. So
It looks very healthy,
yeah,
but it's not making a broccoli head.
That might not come until later, like, January-ish. Yeah,
Maybe.
it just may not be yet.
did you put it in as a seedling or did you start from seed, and what kind of timing?
I started it as a seed and then I transplanted it once it got big enough. And it's been going like all summer long. Maybe I shouldn't have planted it at the beginning of the summer.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I should have put it in now.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Because even if and when it does develop, it may be somewhat bitter just because it was maturing over the summer.
Right.
But the fact that it hasn't put out anything yet is, it's not, I don't think it's going to, because it's been in there too long.
Yeah. It's
And,
you know, to watch.
Sometimes, especially with cauliflower, can be pretty persnickety about, the buttoning, where the head is only like the size of a button. Cauliflower can be particularly, persnickety is my best word. We're just not ending up maturing properly. So you don't know, sometimes a 6-pack, you might get 2 that end up being really nice heads. And since this is a cross of the broccoli and the cauliflower, maybe there's an essence of the cauliflower that says, I'm just not going to do what you want me to do.
Louisa, you taught me something here, that if I want big, beautiful broccoli leaves, I'm going to plant mine early.
Yeah. This thing's a monster. So you might let it go just for fun.
Ultimately see what it'll do. And in the meantime, see, especially the smaller leaves, use those to harvest rather than waiting around for the thing that you think it's supposed to do.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, next question. No-till soil, how does that work? And how do you amend it? Do any of you use no-till methodology? I see your head shaking, Yvonne.
Judy, you want to go ahead?
Well, I was always a person who took a pitchfork and went really, really deep in all my raised beds and turned everything over. And it was exhausting, and I always, it's a lot of work. And then when I did the Master Gardener program, I learned about no-till, where you just continually add layers on top. And now I kind of do a little bit of a combination of the two. So I use just a hoe and go in maybe 2 inches. And then I add my compost on the top, and I'm a big worm casting person. So I add that on the top, and then I just plant. I just continue on. You're not then messing with the soil culture that's going on. So that's what people are really into for no-till. But I just harvested sweet potatoes this week, and they were so deep that I basically, we're talking, some of them were about 18 inches deep in my raised bed. So guess what? I was having to till that soil with my hands. I was getting way down there. So the no-till didn't work in that bed at all. I really messed up its system.
Well, and as long as you're incorporating all that organic matter, for the first couple months, all the microorganisms will be lost in terms of the connections, the networking that they've established. But because you incorporated all that richness into the soil, it will enable them to feed and reestablish so many of those connections, the real soil networking, which is what the basic value is. So wherever you can, but certainly when you transplant a seedling, you're going to be doing a certain amount of disturbing, and then just making a point of trying to layer things on it rather than be digging it up, twice a year.
Did you want to add anything to this, Christine?
No, mostly what everyone was saying. I think for vegetable gardening, it's a little bit like edible gardening, it's a little bit harder to just leave everything. And but for landscaping, I definitely do leave everything. Like even when the poppies come up, we just kind of break the branches, we don't pull them out, and you just kind of keep on mulching, keep on layering. But like Judy was saying, like when you're harvesting, or like Yvonne was saying, it's a little bit harder to be absolutely no-till. But just, like you can never have enough mulch, you can never have enough compost, right? So keep on adding those nutrients to your soil.
Christine brought up a really good point about, she was talking about ornamentals, the poppies, just letting the root remain in the soil. But you can do that with your peas and other edibles as well. Cut it off at the soil level, so that the roots that have been established by that plant, that as they decay, there's still all those little pathways going down for the rain and the worms and everything else to be able to continue. So it's not just, I don't think that you have to think that edible gardening is going to be different in that sense. Just consider that everything that grows in that soil, all those roots, are now providing avenues for all of that good stuff to continue in that bed.
Okay, ready for a new question? Again from Louisa. Louisa sent in her questions early by email, and I thank you for that. It makes my life simple. She has plants that have died over and over and over and over and over in an area next to a cinder block wall. And she's wondering if there could be a problem with the lime from the concrete or some other substance.
You mean she keeps planting different plants, but they all die?
Louisa, you're muted.
Yes. Yes, in a certain area along it seems like everything is just like, it starts and then it just all turns brown and wilts. And it's like, what we did is we had an in-ground jacuzzi, which we demoed. And so the guys dug in and dumped all the concrete and gunite and all that stuff was dumped, cleared out. And then I'm just wondering whether could it be something from that got put aside and put in that area, or is it really the leaching from the cinder block wall that forms the boundary of our property that's leaching out into the soil? Now I have done a pH test, but I don't, that may not go far enough in testing what's going on with the soil.
Yeah, that's a lot of chemistry going on there.
Yeah.
Certainly with all the buried bits, that's not going to provide other than some good drainage, because there's all that brick stuff that's in the meantime. She might consider just using that area as a container gardening and putting it on top.
Yeah, I thought of that. It's like, I've tried numerous times and it's like, everything's just gone kaput.
Yeah.
Louisa, have you had a real soil test done?
Actually,
like when you send away the soil to a lab and they do an analysis for you?
I did do that. We have specific veggie boxes, which we dug down 18 inches and actually removed that soil. And then, because I was afraid of contamination, so then I replaced that soil, but outside of the veggie boxes, which is where the problem appears to be, that soil has not been tested. So maybe I should do another. Maybe I should do another lab test.
That would be my recommendation. And I volunteer at the Monrovia Community Garden, and we did a soil test through University of Massachusetts. And the reason we chose them is because they are so reasonable. Some of these places are really very expensive. So if you actually just Google UMass soil testing, they come back with a very, very thorough analysis of your soil. And it really helped us. Our soil was incredibly high in phosphorus, incredibly high. So we had to adjust some of the cover crops and, do something with that area. It used to be covered with lawn forever. But I learned a lot from that test, and they email the results to you. Again, it's from Massachusetts, so some of the recommendations you have to take with a grain of salt, but it worked for us.
Great, I'll do that. Thank you.
Another benefit of the UMass testing, because over the years we went with different labs, including some local to LA, but the descriptions were so unhelpful because it was pure scientific jargon, so it didn't help. And that's what the UMass is so helpful with, that the actual recommendations and why and the explanations are very people friendly. So there's several places on the website that you can go to get the different kinds of information that really fills out what the actual results are for your particular tests.
Oh, well, great. Thank you very much.
One other thing I would add, just to jump in, is depending on if your cinder block wall, how it's positioned, like is it south facing, the heat might be a factor too, because it's going to radiate, it's going to collect heat during the day and then radiate it back out. So, I mean, if you're putting in really heat sensitive plants, maybe that could be an issue as well.
Right, actually it is, right? That one area gets extremely hot in the summer. Hadn't thought of that. Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. These are great questions, by the way, and great answers. I don't know if everyone's enjoying this as much as I am. Deborah asked, with containers and non-edible plants, when roots outgrow the pot, can the roots be cut back and replanted? Will the plant eventually miniaturize? Bonsai beans, perhaps?
I have no experience with that. It's a great idea.
Well, I can say one thing. Do you guys know living lettuces like you buy in the grocery store and they've got the root balls? when we eat all the lettuce off of them, I plant them back out, and I always trim the roots before I plant them. And that's because they seem to establish better with the bottoms of the roots cut off. That's all I know about that one. Jessica?
Yeah, that's always a good idea to trim, because you've harvested much of the top, because it was the lettuce, and now you do need to reduce the amount of the roots down below, assuming it's a nice clump of good roots. And in those hydroponically grown lettuces, that certainly is the case. However, you may find, I found years ago when I started African violets, by putting a leaf in the water, that if I waited too long, perhaps a month after I had seen the first little white roots, if I waited too long and it continued to develop itself in the water, it never liked being translated into the soil when I would, transplant it into a little container with the soil mix. So it's like it grew up water, and now what are you asking me to do? Grow in this dirt, it just wasn't working. So it may be somewhat of a downturn that way, just because those were grown hydroponically. But even in a regular container, when you are getting the roots coming out through the drainage hole, especially after a year or two, you will want to repot that plant, and you slice away some of the roots along the edge of it and also at the bottom, and then you give it you really massage out much of the potting mix, the old potting mix, and then plant it in a slightly larger container with the new potting mix, and that will renovate the whole root ball and give it not only new food because of the new potting mix, but also reducing some of the bulk of the roots in that plant.
So then it's safe to say that trimming back the roots does not affect the integrity of the plant.
No, it benefits it.
Christina, you've got.
Oh, no, just the question was like, if she cut it, if she could actually dwarf it, was that the intent, or the second part of the question?
That was your original question, right, Deb?
Yeah, it's not so much will it dwarf, although I have a California live oak that started that I am interested in turning into a bonsai. I think I have mixed feelings about, is that fair to a tall tree, but yeah, it's just that I have some containers that have non-edibles that I don't want to buy in containers slightly larger. It just, the container works for the area, and I just want to keep it that size. So when, for example, a cedar tree outgrows that pot root wise, can I just cut the roots, give it new soil, and keep it in the same size? So I understand it won't grow bigger, but is that fair to do to a plant? And will it continue to live at sort of that container size if I?
Yes, because you are reducing the root, but you're giving it the same container and you're just refreshing the soil. Yeah. So yes, you can do that ad infinitum. Okay. And that in fact is what the bonsais are as well, in a much more extreme, small kind of container. But if you go to any, here in Southern California, San Gabriel Nursery has a tremendous grouping of the bonsais. So you can see that there are, I don't know about there, but certainly at Washington, D.C., at the Botanic Garden, there's 600-year-old trees that are there, and they have been nourished all these years, but only in these small container So it definitely takes attention, and frequent attention, just because you have now trapped that tree in that smallish container.
Okay, well, we have actually another root question, which kind of goes back to the whole no-till soil question, which is tomato roots. Should you leave them in the soil or should you pull them out?
I will answer what I do because I have a huge, and Jessica's laughing because we have some root knot nematode problems in our in our boxes, which I'm dealing with in many, many ways. But when I pull out tomatoes in that particular box, the roots are so gnarly, I get rid of them. I don't compost them. I'm very careful and I put them in my green bin and let the world of compost deal with them. But and the roots are very long. Tomato roots can get really, really long. So I take out all my roots, and I know some people don't. They cut the plant back at the surface. But is it a personal preference? Yvonne, Christine, what would you say?
I think again with tomato roots, they're so gnarly that I also just take out my tomato roots.
Yeah, anytime you see any kind of a diseased situation, not only the roots, but literally take a shovel, not a spading fork, but a shovel, so that you can get the entire perhaps 9-10 inches of that soil and literally remove that, because you can't get out all the roots, and there's always going to leave some of those real teeny nodules in there, and then that's just going to proliferate all over again. So certainly, if it doesn't look good, absolutely take it out. I remove all of my tomatoes, even the ones that are, VFT, the whole thing, just because as a crop, tomatoes are so potentially problematic in terms of the roots and any kind of composting that you do. So I will not subject my garden after the year that they have grown. I will get rid of all that.
And if you don't, audience, if you don't know Yvonne in her world, she is the tomato queen. So I would always take her advice on tomatoes, always.
Nice.
Especially eating them.
Which I have a tomato question. I have 2 tomato plants that both have like small tomatoes, and it's looking like I may be able to overwinter them. I am still getting cherry tomatoes off of one of them in November. Is there a particular variety that is good for overwintering in this climate and zone?
Go ahead, Yvonne.
Well, certainly the cherry tomatoes, any of them, just because the fruits are so tiny that they will ripen much more quickly than any of the larger size, even the mid-size tomatoes. But you do have to recognize, and it's always worth doing. Even with peppers, I have trimmed back, where I see that nice new growth coming up again. And I figure, hey, it's got a great root system there already. It should take off. Well, after 2 years, putting in new plants as well as trimming these old ones, I ended up with the same kind of, the same amount of yield. So there really was no benefit to keeping those plants in there. However, peppers, I have found, do a much better job of the crops over the winter, having really nice, fresh, crunchy peppers along with the lettuces, even though it's theoretically a summer crop. Mine just kind of sit here all summer. And then once it gets this nice mild weather, they take off. But back to the tomatoes. Initially, I did trim down my bushes to where I saw the new growth coming out. And then I would have some tomatoes, certainly for the new year, and even, Valentine's Day and all that. And it was kind of fun to just see how long you could encourage them to bear more tomatoes. However, for the space you have in your garden, I heartily recommend you play with that with your tomatoes just to see the novelty of it all. But you'll find that eating those tomatoes, you could have gotten the same quality at the market. And you could have used that space in your garden for something more of the brassicas and the cool season crops that really love that kind of weather and will do tremendous crops. So it's like novelty value. It's very nice to do, but concentrate on the stuff you really like to eat that is going to be winter is the time for it to do it.
Okay.
So Yvonne,
Go ahead, please, Christine.
you've done that with peppers. Would you say, because I actually have an eggplant right now, another hot weather thing that is overwintering, and a little bit, I'm kind of doing it for the novelty, but it wasn't doing so well during the really hot heat, but now it's actually really forming beautiful leaves. And so would you say the same thing for something like an eggplant as you were saying with the peppers?
Sure, play with it.
Yeah.
You don't know that you may end up like I did, enjoying my peppers over winter. You may do, I would have thought that the eggplant would have been too tender. But of course, whether or not we have any temperatures that get low enough to be problematic is a whole different issue. I haven't had any real frost, even light frost, in maybe 6-7 years. So to go ahead and encourage those plants to kind of continue doing their thing, it's worked fine. But before then, and when I was up in Davis, I could never do that because we got hard frosts several times, through the winter. So it depends really where you are. And, as gardeners, I think we hate to get rid of a plant that's doing well. So see what it'll do, just play with it and let
I
it.
can add one little thing about what I do with tomatoes. Oops, sorry, I'm freezing. Everybody else good?
Yeah, you're okay.
Okay. I listened to a podcast done by Rogers Gardens down in Newport Beach, and they do them. I think it's every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 9 or 9:30. Happens to be my walk time. And they actually did one on winter tomatoes, which this was interesting to me, is that they were talking about, and Yvonne, I'd love your input on this. They were talking about varieties that have names that include words like frozen or icy or iceberg or something. And so I, of course, because I'm an experimenter, went out and got 4 winter type tomatoes. And what I did, this was in late August, I think late August. And I put them in a trough, an old feeding trough, which is metal, so it's warm. So the roots are warm, and I am getting unbelievable flowers and small tomatoes on those things. And I've never been a winter tomato person because I said, oh my God, the rinds are so tough. They're really not as good. But I'm experimenting with climate change and with using warm roots. I may get something. I don't think we're going to take a break, Jess, but if we did, I would run outside and take pictures of the tags and tell you what kind of tomatoes they are.
Yeah, that the first one I became aware of in that whole area was called Siberia. And I thought, well, I guess so. And Steve Gatto, over the years, when he would make presentations at the Arboretum, he would promote the winter growing of them as well. And then he was working with Rogers Gardens. So I think as more of those varieties become available, I mean, literally from, Russia, where they get warm, but on the other hand, you know, to get any kind of a crop over an extended period of time, those are the kinds of varieties that they will deal with. So it may be, you know, a very much of a positive opportunity to check with the different kinds of varieties that all have that kind of coating to them to be the winter. You know, that's as good as it gets in those areas. So it may in fact actually have some flavor to it and be a good producer. So absolutely, experimentation is the playtime in the garden.
And if it works, I'm going to save those seeds for Slola.
There you go.
Yay. Okay. I'm trying to figure out how to group some of these questions together. Let's get into seedlings for a moment. Olivia asked, can you start seeds outdoors? And Jessica, I think you should take this one because I know that's what you do.
Well, I think all of us do. Christine, do you want to start and then I can jump in? Or
The question is starting seeds
You know
outdoors.
how like a lot of us start seeds in the winter for our spring garden and we start them indoors under grow lights? Excuse me, I think she's asking, can you start seeds outdoors?
Well, I think it really depends on what crop you're trying to grow. Like there are just some, I saw some questions popping up under the chat. Like there are just some things that germinate so quickly that you don't want to necessarily transplant at all. So just looking really at what, I mean, is she talking specifically about things that, like we've been talking about eggplant and peppers and things that you might want to get a little head start to, but I think it just pay attention to your seed packets, pay attention to, because it really depends on what you can. Or is she talking about, sorry, is she talking about like starting seedling trays outside or direct planting?
she's saying it's mostly about brassicas. And she's adding in the chat. I think they, if I remember from, and you can correct me, Olivia, that you said that you started some in a tray and it didn't do well. And then you can unmute yourself too if you want to just jump in.
Yeah, we have like a lot of like little seed starting trays, and just we've tried a couple of times with starting seeds in them and they just haven't done very well. And it's mostly been brassicas and lettuce and things like that.
Olivia, you're very garbled audio wise.
I think generally anytime you can start seeds outdoors, but do them indoors as well, if you're concerned about getting a much earlier crop. But part of the problem I've always had with starting them ahead of time, especially indoors, is that you have to end up having enough light so they're not just reaching to the window and then hardening them off. And to me, that just ends up being more effort than I want to deal with, because I could have just waited a month, started them outside, and they pop right up. They're really strong. I may or may not have to transplant them or even thin them. And consequently, it's a much stronger plant. And so by the time it gets around to harvesting, I go with the outdoor every time. Now, remember that any of your, like your carrots and beets and root crops, you automatically start outdoors in the bed that they are going to mature in, because those little fine roots that go down much further than the part you can see, those are problematic with transplanting. So those automatically you want to be outside in any case. But anything that is indoors, you know, like most of your brassicas are going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time before they really are doing well inside, in order to get them outside and actually in the bed where they're going to be maturing. So it's another place where I loved doing that initially because I was playing in the garden all the time. But ultimately it was just too much effort, and I just waited a month and it worked really well and really strong plants. And so I just didn't bother futzing around with it indoors.
But Olivia, your question, were you having issues starting the brassicas outside in containers and then wanting to transplant them? I see we have some questions about transplanting in general, but was that the issue? I'm just trying to understand.
Olivia?
Oh, okay. So we were having trouble getting them sprout in cells, seed starting cells. And doing that outdoors, correct? Okay.
I agree with Yvonne. It's too much trouble to do them inside. So I've come up with ways that I can start all my seedlings outside. In fact, I made a pact with myself this year that I wasn't going to buy a single seedling from a nursery, that I was actually going to try to do everything from seeds. And it's been very successful. And then I've had some problems with some things, but I have a place that's kind of shady. So I know that if I'm starting like the brassicas, if I'm starting those in August to get a jump on things, they can't be in full sun. They would burn. They wouldn't come up at all. And right now, when starting in spring, and Jessica and I kind of both are thinking about doing this more, I buy those clear plastic umbrellas from the Dollar Tree, and I put them outside on top of the plants because I'm trying to kind of mimic a greenhouse. So I'm a big fan of the Dollar Tree. If you came and looked at my garden right now, I've got all sorts of plastic laundry baskets all over things so that the squirrels don't eat this and the birds don't eat that. So I'm not an indoor starter at all. I'm an outdoor starter. And I actually have learned from me is that I don't water as it should water. You know, you're supposed to just mist them carefully. So I fill the trays with water. So I underwater. My water comes up into my cells. That's just me. So when I pick up the 6-pack, actually, those roots are down through because they're searching for that water. But they transplant, and there was another question about transplanting. They transplant beautifully.
Yeah, I did see a question about transplanting, about them dying. And I think you're looking, whenever you move a plant from one place to another, it's vulnerable. And so if you start seeds inside, it's really important to do hardening off, like what we call hardening off. So you have to get them used to being outside before you put them in the ground outside. So that means putting them out for an hour or two, not in the direct sun at first. It's like you're slowly getting them ready, and then maybe after a few days you can leave them out longer, make sure they're getting some sun, not like your afternoon heat, but maybe in the morning. And so it's a really long process. And like Yvonne said, like I don't have time or patience for it, and I always ruin it somehow. So I forget and I leave them overnight, and it could, whatever. But so there is that hardening off process. So if you are starting indoors, then you have to take that extra step of getting plants and used to being outdoors before then now uprooting them and putting them in the ground. Another reason they might be dying is that maybe they're too young, waiting until they have at least two sets of true leaves and not that initial baby leaf or embryonic leaf that comes up first. Those I think would be the two other reasons. I don't know if there's other reasons why they might be dying off really quickly.
Well, one technique that I have found that really aids a little seedling in catching on is to literally massage the root ball. So you're loosening it up, because in whatever kind of a container you have started the seed, it's in the 6-pack, there's going to be circling. There is a tray from Peaceful Valley Farm Supply up in Nevada City that it's a triangle cell. It's all styrofoam, but each cell is like 1 or 2 inches at the top, and it comes to a point at the bottom. So all the roots are automatically pointing down. And so when you rough up a little bit of the root ball, then you transplant it, those roots will then spread out into that soil. rather than just staying that little sharp square or whatever it is that was the size of the pot. And those roots then will have a hard time unraveling themselves in order to go out into the surrounding soil. So, and of course, then watering, I always say to water it 3 times immediately, because it then completely saturates the soil and the root ball and the surrounding soil, so that you're literally melting all those little soil bits up against every one of those roots. And consequently, those roots can then be absorbing the moisture and whatever fertilizer is there in order to continue their development and get really well established. And that's whether it's a little thing from a 6-pack or if it's a gallon size or a 5-gallon. And of course, you should always transplant the smaller ones, because then that enables them to more quickly get acclimated to that new place that you've provided for them to mature.
Okay. Anshu asked a great question. Does somebody want to add something there? Okay, Anshu says tomatoes, peppers, and beans he's growing in containers. His question, or her question, I'm not sure. Their question is, should they rotate the crops in the containers? And if you don't rotate, how do you feed? How do you add to the soil?
And the soil. Sorry, yeah, it's Anshu here. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I asked that because I heard that the same plant, it changes the chemistry of the soil, because it, I don't know, fixes the nitrogen or something. So is that a problem for tomatoes or beans or peppers? And if so, does alternating the plant help from one year to the next? Or if you amend the soil, you don't need to do it. And how do you amend the soil properly?
I ask a question. How big of a container are you talking about? Are you talking like a big one, or are you just talking about kind of like a pot?
I'm talking about pot, let's say 2 feet in diameter, 2 feet in diameter and about 2 feet deep, that kind, or grow bags, which are about 1.5 feet diameter. And
Yeah, the grow bags.
Yeah.
Who'd like to take this one?
Well, I'll always take it. I want you guys to offer your wisdom as well. There's 2 problems with not rotating. Number 1, whatever's growing in that container is absorbing whatever specific fertilizer it needs because of its particular specificity of plant. Number 2, if you keep growing the same kind of plant in there, you're continuing to, even with amendments, you're continuing to suck up that particular formula of fertilizer. But even worse, because you're growing the same kind of plant in there, you are making a monoculture in that pot, in the sense that potential diseases and pests that are attracted to that particular plant, you're now providing, hey, we're over here, come and get us. So between the sucking up of the fertilizer specifics and the potential for whatever diseases and pests, attractants, you want to change those crops to literally confuse whatever pests there are that are trolling for that particular plant, or also you want other plants to be picking up different formulas of the fertilizer in there. So it's always a good idea to go ahead and rotate the crops that you can. Now, you know, if you have like a California native or a tree or something that you're going to basically be keeping it in that container, that's similar to the previous questions that was talking about shaving out some of the root zone and putting in new potting mix. So that's the best you can hope to do for those plants that are going to be automatically staying in those containers. But most of the time that is going to be ornamentals rather than edibles.
Yes,
The
that is
edibles are the ones that are, it's more problematic to not rotate. Even if it's 2 or 3, you know, the basic figure is 4 years is best to come back to the same place with that particular crop, but 3 years is doable. And some people have so little space to be able to circulate their crops that they may only do it every other year. So whatever you can manage, but 4 years is supposed to be ideal. And there are some, the different families of crops, like the brassicas together, or the corns, you know, the grasses or the tomatoes, the solanums. It's the whole family that you're dealing with needing to rotate. And there are some tables that show this family should be followed by this family, so that it isn't just arbitrary planting some other family there.
Where can you see those tables?
Pardon me?
Where can you see those tables which say which plant should follow which one, or?
If you just Google rotating crops,
Okay.
some of the links there, the Rodale research farm back in Emmaus, Pennsylvania is one of the first ones that came out with the specific kind of rotation plan. But you can just Google it and check on the many recommendations that come up.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And in terms of amendment, is it? I've heard that if you remove about 1/3 of the old soil and replace it with, 1/3, replace it with good compost and a good mixture of compost and other things, and that should be okay.
Yes, but then it's 2/3 of the old stuff. So better just to give it all new stuff. And then the potting mix that you're removing, put that into your compost pile or use it as mulch elsewhere in the garden.
I see.
Don't throw it away because it's got all the basic organic matter helpful for the garden as a whole.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Yvonne.
Great questions, Anshu. Great questions.
Oh my God, gardening friends, we are having way too much fun here.
Yeah.
We have hit the hour point. There are a few more questions that I would love to throw out and get some answers to, but somebody suggested that we need a part 2. And I think that, we should plan on doing this again. What do y'all think?
Sure.
Do you want more of this? Oh yeah, okay, good. So let's see. Let's talk about for a minute about what we want to, there are 3 more areas I want to cover as quickly as possible. 1 is what should we be planting now? 2 is mulching your garden, and 3 is organic pest control. So let's start with the first one, planting now. And we should also talk about garlic varieties for this zone, because this is a very good time to plant garlic. Who would like to start?
What to plant now?
Yeah, what to plant now?
I think Joy covered a little bit of that in the chat. Yes, Joy, did I see that pop up?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Okay, this is kind of the salad green season, but I'm going to just kind of close my eyes and go around my garden and tell you what I have right now. I've got kale, I've got cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, red cabbage, green cabbage. Just put in 4 different kinds of garlic because my garlic came really late this year because issues with everybody wanting garlic. So garlic just came, onions, and I'm planting onions from seed this year, taking what's people are saying that they are so much better that way. I have shelling peas. I have flat peas. What are they called? The
Snow peas.
yeah, thank you very much. Snow peas. I've got Swiss chard, beets, bok choy, 2 different kinds of bok choy, spinach, lettuce, carrots. And isn't it funny that you can actually go to a nursery and find little 6-packs of carrots in clumps? Yvonne, it didn't drive you nuts? It's because, really.
Yeah.
So I think I probably have a few more things, but that's all I can think of right now. Those are the things that I plant. Those are the pretty traditional things to plant now. It looks like Joy just posted some file, which is going to tell everybody what to plant right now.
Christine, what do you have growing?
Pretty much what Judy was saying. I've got my kale, I've got my chard. The sugar snap peas are coming up right now really fast, doing really well. But some lettuces, pretty much like she said, the salad greens. I've got my little planting chart here too. Just that it covers it pretty well. This one is from Burpee. So, but there's also, of course, our Master Gardener Handbook has a great planting guide, when to plant what. So I saw that there were some requests for reading materials. So I would recommend those two. And sorry, since we're doing a book share, I saw some questions about California native gardens, and this is my favorite for California native gardens. If you want more reading material, it's California Native Plants for the Garden. So those are the tomes that sit next to me always in my, they're just fun to read. Yeah.
The file that Joy put in the chat is the planting schedule taken. It's adapted from this book, the Master Gardener Handbook, for the interior valleys. So if you're in San Gabriel, San Fernando, and it's for sowing seeds. So just take that with a grain of salt. Like if you're doing transplanting, that window is going to widen, on both sides, and especially on the later end. So it's just sort of a starting point. I did the adaptation. Because the one in the book it's got all 4 sort of climates in one chart. So I'm pulling them out per climate and making a visual. So it's easy to follow, but that's really specific to the interior valleys. So if you live on the coast, it'd be a little different.
So Jessica, what is your favorite variety of garlic to grow?
I've had the most success year over year with the Ichilium Red. That's a big head with big cloves. So that one has been super consistent for me. I've also done well with the Lourdes Italian, which I've seen listed in the chat already. And the broadleaf Czech also, which I think the broadleaf is a hardneck. So that one will put up a scape, which are in the fancy restaurants, they always like, oh, we have garlic scapes. It's really just the bloom, the little bud, that blossom that comes out, and you can pick those. And actually you should, if you have hardneck varieties, take the scapes out when they come out, because if you don't, it'll affect the integrity of the head. But you can eat them, you can eat the scapes. So those are the 3. Last year, my garlic, I had all these new varieties to try and it did miserably. So I have so I went back to like some of my old favorites. But yeah, like Judy, the garlic sold out fast and furious this year. If you are planning on growing garlic, I recommend buying it in the spring, and they will ship it to you in the fall, because by mid to late summer, most of it is sold out.
Yvonne, what do you do for garlic?
Well,
Do you grow it?
no, I used to, but now what I do is I decided I wanted to eat much more garlic. And so what I get is a little bag of the already shucked ones. The bag is about like this. And I
Yes.
get that at my local Armenian market. So I found that I am much more likely to use lots of garlic because it's already, you know, had the peeled the skin off of it. If I have to do it myself, I will just do 1 or 2 cloves, whereas this way I can do 5 or 6 and not feel like I've used up my stash. So I'm afraid I've gone the easy way on the garlic.
I personally have an addiction to soft neck garlic because I love making braids. And I'm about halfway through my braid from this year, but I have got so much garlic in the ground that next spring I'll be making a fresh braid. Christine, do you grow garlic?
I don't. I'm not currently growing any, no.
Okay, Judy?
Oh, yes. But it's because Jessica's kind of influenced me about garlic, because I went over to her house last year, the year before, to drop off something. And she goes, would you like some garlic? And I go, well, yes. And she gives me this big of a head of garlic. So this is the first year I've grown it in terms of not going to Trader Joe's, buying a garlic, taking the cloves apart, putting it in the ground. And that's the garlic that I would have. And I never even looked to see what kind it was. It's always been delicious. It's soft neck. So I do braid it, but oh my God, my braids are horrific. My husband braids garlic better than I do. But this year I got my garlic from a place called Fillory Farms, which is in Washington, right, Jess?
Right.
And Jessica and I were going back and forth chatting on Facebook. I go, oh, I just got my garlic. It just came on my porch. She goes, I hope I get mine today. So I've got 4 different kinds in there. I don't know what they're going to be, but that Echilium red, if that's what you guys call it, I have some of that in.
That is the most garlicky garlic I have ever grown. As in, it just has such an intense flavor. It's wonderful. Okay, moving right along. Can you mulch? I'm sorry, not mulch. Can you compost citrus rinds?
Can you do what to citrus?
Compost it. Can you add citrus peels
Oh.
to your compost?
You can in small quantities.
Okay.
They've always told us not to over citrus our compost. And Joy happens to be a master composter.
Ooh.
Joy.
Yes, I compost citrus rinds. I have a separate worm compost. And of course, I don't use citrus rinds in my worm compost because they don't like that. It hurts their skin. But in my regular compost, yes, I put it in there.
Okay, sadly, we are not going to make it through all of the wonderful questions that have come in, but there is one more that I know is near and dear to my heart. I've seen it come up in our monthly meetings before, and I'm just going to throw it out there. Organic pest management, especially spider mites. Who has any great spider mite or even half-assed spider mite solutions? Because those things are nasty. And they love the hot summers we've been getting.
Yeah.
So what do y'all do about your spider mites?
Some years I have I have wonderful crops of spider mites, and some years they don't seem to bother me at all. This year was good for me. I didn't have many at all. I do use it's neem oil plus an insecticidal soap spray. Early, get them early, but identify them. That's what one thing as master gardeners that we all do is identify our pests early so that we can use the right kind of organic solution, not meaning solution, but solution
Yes.
to them.
Well, what they do like the best is the dryness, and they really are they do their nests and everything underneath the leaves. So, and it basically is an August thing because usually by then it is so hot. And as a gardener, we may have, because it was so hot, we haven't gone out there and really taken care that there is sufficient water going to the plants, and consequently, and especially if you haven't fertilized your plants, especially the tomatoes, when they are putting out their blossoms, to carry them through with the energy, they're going to be susceptible to the spider mites. What I'm trying to do here is looking on the, there, spider mites, on the UC IPM pest notes. And there is,
IPM, for anyone who doesn't know, is Integrated Pest Management.
right. Of course, the thing is you might want to put the link on there, because the pest notes and the quick tips provided by the university are just excellent, and they are so detailed, and they also help with identifying various pests and things. So it would be a good link to have on there for people to be able to access, because this is most of the time when there's a question coming through, I give them the links to whichever pest notes and stuff it is. So it's, Sue, do you want me to read it to you, or?
No, it's up there. I found it and I posted it.
Great. But primarily it is going to be the dryness and the underneath. And if you see this very, very fine webbing on your plants, you know, take a sprinkler to it and wash it down, both the undersides and the top sides, just to dislodge them. And that's always good in the beginning spring for aphids as well. If something has been too much nitrogen on it, those aphids are just going to proliferate. And then once you knock them off of the plant, they literally, their mouth parts are left on the plant, and their body is now at the bottom of the plant. So there's no way they can crawl back up. So it's good to be able to know what you're looking for and then take care of it immediately when you see it, so that it doesn't spread to the rest of the that particular kind of plant and other ones.
And the hint that we use is just Googling UCANR spider mites or UCANR raccoons, and you are going to get pages and pages of information on these pests. So UCANR, put it somewhere in Google and it will take you to what we use as science-based Master Gardener information. And it's very, very helpful.
And UC stands for University of California, correct?
Yes, Agriculture and Natural Resources.
Which means it's all information that is localized to our state, which makes it even more precise than just a general Google for pest control.
Yeah. All right.
Well, that's been awesome. Does anybody have any questions about the Master Gardener program and how you get into it?
Thanks for the reminder, Sue. I had it all queued up. I did want to make a plug because the applications for the training program for next year, for 2022, are coming out really soon. The announcement and the application will go live in just a couple of weeks. And so if you're interested in becoming a Master Gardener and joining the 300 plus volunteers we have now all over LA County, and there are really some people out there, Master Gardeners, doing incredible work. And it's really like all different kinds. So there's people who are really focused on edible crops. There's a group focused on therapeutic gardens, a group on tree care, pollinators / California. I mean, there's really just, I mean, it's an amazing group of people to belong to. And so I wanted to make a plug if you're interested. And I see Joy has put the website, and I have a couple things here too, so you can get on our emailing list for LA County Master Gardener. It's a public list. that I manage, because I also work for the program. I have like several different hats. Our announcement for the Master Gardener training will go out over that. You can also email me directly at my UC email address, and I can give you a lot more information about the training program. It's a 13-week program over Saturdays. It starts in late February, early March usually, and goes through May. If any of you want to jump in and talk about especially Christine, you just graduated, so.
Actually in 2016. So
I don't know how, I thought it was this year. I don't know how I messed it up.
I just transferred back. So here's a plug for LA County specifically, because I was up in the Monterey Bay, which is Monterey County and Santa Cruz County, and LA County by far, I think, has a really wonderful, just much more involved. And, we have a specific, a lot of questions came here about like edible gardening. I think that's something kind of special to LA County too, that not all counties emphasize. So I think there's just a lot of amazing projects going on in LA County and specifically.
And I just want to say that culture was established by Yvonne, who basically got the whole food growing Master Gardener program. What year did you start that, Yvonne?
Well, on the Master Gardener public website is the my monthly tips. So it starts out each month with a paragraph of what you can plant now of the edibles, and also and what you can do about all the different edibles, and then the ornamentals, and then a general kind of listing where I deal with compost and mulch and other kinds of things. But also, since I retired in 2015, leading the program, I started my own website, which has a blog where I talk about my Pasadena garden every couple of weeks, with the intent of letting people know of kind of specifically what is happening right now in my garden. And consequently, each of them can kind of compare it with what's happening in their own gardens. And I do have my own mailing list that I send announcements of the blog each time. And also there's all the monthly tips that I have updated from the one that's on the Master Gardener website. So if you're interested in getting job opportunities and gardening events around like this meeting, then just email me at gardeninginla@gmail.com.
I like to think of Yvonne as the mother of front yard food gardens. She has inspired. She personally, when she was holding the job, trained over 1,100 master gardeners.
Yeah.
And many of these wonderful people I have met over the years that I've been involved with gardening and food gardens, and they were all inspired by Yvonne to like go forth and procreate their knowledge,
Right.
so to speak.
Very good. Go forth and play in your garden.
And other people's
benefits.
gardens. Yes, and yes, I like that. It is a growing movement.
All right, we have gone way over time and people are still here. So
we definitely have to do this one again.
Do this again. And if we did not get to your question, I apologize. And just hopefully it got answered or addressed in some way in the chat. I know Joy was very busy answering questions in the chat, but we are going to say goodbye. We will be back next month in December with Gina, one of our longtime volunteers. She's going to be teaching us how to make fire cider. She is she runs an apothecary, and so she is super knowledgeable on the herbs and plants that we can use medicinally. And so she's going to be here. It'll be a hands-on, bring your ingredients kind of workshop. So that'll be December 4th at 10. And then we break in January, and we'll be back in person in February. So, and with maybe a hybrid
situation going on. So just keep your eye on the emails from us. We're working with the library to try out a hybrid to have, so if people want to stay online, they can still join in. It'll be an experiment. But as it was when we all came online, right? So stay tuned for that. And please come next month and in February. And thank you so much to our panelists and our chat panelists, our master gardeners for joining us and taking the time to be with us this morning. There's so much information, so much great information. So thank you.